Ryan, you look at this class as a whole, and we feel uncertain outside of the top three, and that's going to be a narrative we're going to continue to bang home until we get more information, more pro days, more draft capital. We're just being safe, guys.
It's early, yeah.
Right? We just want to keep as much coin in your pocket as possible. Make sure that at the end of the day, you guys can afford a McMuffin or something. So
there you go.
So when it comes to that rule of thumb, the next tier, when we start to look at players that we may be slightly uncertain about, but have mega upside, have shown plenty of juice, have shown plenty of traits, have enough hype in their own right, a guy like Javonte Williams out of North Carolina comes to mind, Ryan. And when you look at sort of your list of running backs and runners in this class, is he right there at number 3 for you?
He is. I dropped my full top 10 again, Patreon-only audio back on the 23rd. Last week, I dropped my top 10 rookie running backs, and Javonte Williams, absolutely right, slotted right in my RB3 position. And I actually went out probably a few weeks prior to that, and I had a tweet that suggested that, this class, to your point, there's certainly a big 2 at running back that we want to focus on. Najee Harris, you and I already chopped him up. We got Travis Etienne on ice. That'll be coming soon. Those 2 players, I think the consensus, Nato, is people are pretty confident in the way that they project where they rank in rookie drafts and kind of the draft capital that will be behind them. But then we land on someone like Javonte Williams, who just had a really, really strong season, really made himself a lot of money. And my tweet basically said that I wonder if the conversation at some point, as you kind of allude to, as we kind of navigate through these off-season waters and we arrive eventually with some pro day numbers and weigh-ins and all that good stuff, I wonder if the conversation eventually shifts to, is this really a big 3 at running back, with Williams kind of rounding out the Harris, the Etienne, and then obviously Williams at 3. I mean, I think he has that sort of potential for sure.
When you start to break down Williams as a whole and the production that we saw this year, and again, I think there are people out there that are going to question, well, why was he splitting time? Why was his production not better earlier on at North Carolina? I think those are questions that you definitely have answers for. When you look at him as a whole, just the body of work that we saw this year, he checked every box that we are typically concerned about with a runner that we hope is a feature runner. Because when you're talking about the 104, 105, 106 draft slot, you don't want a project. You want a guy that's going to get on the field, or you want the player with the most upside at their position. And Javonte Williams really checks both boxes. He may be the best all-around player left at running back once we move on from Etienne and Harris. And he may have the most upside of all the guys left potentially. There are some exciting names in this group. But Ryan, when you look at his 2020 season and I go, hey, why did he only have 157 rush attempts? What would your answer to that be?
And we're gonna talk about this a lot more again as we progress through the offseason here. And for those listening to this now, the Senior Bowl game is now behind us. Michael Carter made himself a ton of money, and Javonte Williams backfield running mate here. So Williams splitting work with a rising prospect, a really standout runner in his own right in Michael Carter. So that context I think is super important. I think that's where you were heading with this. It's just given the fact that you had 2 really, I'll say dominant, I mean, this was, I think, the best duo out of a backfield in the college game in the 2020 season. When I look at, so that context is super important, I think, when you go to break down, whether it's box scores, tape, whatever it is. So I think, to your point, you can probably safely put aside volume type concerns, knowing the type of, again, this goes back to the whole teammate score kind of, thought process behind the breakout finder, looking at who is alongside of these players and how those teammates affect production or, throttle production or elevate production, whatever the case may be. So I think that context, especially for Williams' case, and certainly will be the case for Michael Carter as well, is super important here.
When you look at him, at least on film, and you watch what he did, he might be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, is this not maybe the toughest guy to bring down in this entire class?
And I'm glad you brought that up too, because I think that was, and I wrote about this too in my brief little blurb when talking about Javonte Williams too. He's, broken tackles, and the team over at PFF always look at, broken tackles, and famously David Montgomery was that guy in his class too. Just incredible broken tackle work, yards after contact. Alvin Kamara, he stacked that up in a lesser form, but obviously super impressively at Tennessee. So I think broken tackles and yards after contact, all that stuff for a back is super important to me. I think to you as well. And Williams shattered the PFF record, the highest. He was the highest graded running back that they've ever given a grade out to, 95.9. The highest broken tackle attempt over at PFF. I think he was their 6th or 7th best ranked player in college football in general last year over there. Like they do a 101 list or something like that. So for those that rely heavily on PFF, Javonte Williams, certainly metrically the broken tackles and all that is far and above and away the guy that we're talking about in this class. And I think broken tackles is a super important statistic. And I bring up David Montgomery because it's been a bit of a slower start. You and I famously sat behind our desks here, man. You and I podcasted. You and I talked about David Montgomery. We joked about putting cement bricks on his feet, man. He just wasn't a back that did it for you or I. And he caught some really positive game script last season and caught a relatively easier, softer schedule. I think Montgomery is an easy sell, but the point being is he seemed to turn up a little bit. So it's been a slower start. So I think people might see Williams and maybe draw a parallel, accurately or otherwise to a Javonte Williams. I don't know. Have you thought about that comparison? Is that something that you kind of get nervous about given how you and I felt about Montgomery? Do you see any Montgomery in Williams' game?
I think it's hard not to see Montgomery in Williams' game when we do focus on something like broken tackles. And as you said, PFF said that this guy had the most broken tackles in the country with 75, and you look at his yards after contact, he was number 4 in the country with 831. So obviously a hallmark of his game was shedding tacklers, and you can watch him. I mean, literally pull up any game. I mean, any game you want, and it's undeniable the way that he's fighting for extra yardage, tough tackler, and not just like fighting for extra yardage. Like literally guys are just like bouncing off of him, slipping off of his legs. It's just a rarity that he went down on first contact. And that, believe it or not, is exactly what makes Alvin Kamara so special because he's so great as a pass catcher. But I can remember a couple times I've seen him versus Seattle and some other teams where literally tacklers cannot bring him down.
His balance is otherworldly, and I think that's a part of Williams' game. Which again, and I talked about it in my little write-up too. Not all broken tackles in that sense are created equal, but when you truly do watch these players, and Williams is probably a good example as you're alluding to. I mean, just the balance and his ability to consistently shed those tackles certainly stands out.
And think about this. I think there's questions about what maybe his overall speed is going to be. And, burst has proven to be the more valuable metric when we talk about running backs. Le'Veon Bell was not a burner. LaShawn McCoy was not a burner. David Montgomery was not a burner. Burst is the most important thing. And in the country last year in 2020, Williams was second amongst all running backs in carries of over 15 yards with 27. So a lot of big runs came from him as well. So I think there's a lot to like about this player. And believe it or not, let's go to the Jamar Chase parallel. When Jamar Chase enters the league and shatters it, we're just going to reflect back and be like, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase were both just equally dominant. And maybe that's the case here with Carter and with Williams. Sure. Carter being the smaller of the two backs, which might make him less desirable amongst Dynasty and NFL. But Ryan, here's a question. And you and I talked about this a little bit privately. What are the odds if you were making bets? Do you think the odds are pretty good that Williams and Carter might come off the board back to back? Some amount of picks in between them, but they could be the two running backs selected.
Yeah, and there was few players heading into mobile this past week that had kind of rising buzz outside of Carter was kind of far and away and ahead of the pack in that sense, and a week of practice and certainly in the game he made good on all that buzz and showed the country that might have had questions about, as we talked about, splitting workload or sharing a backfield, whatever it might be, that he could be the man for the job if called on. He can carry the load. So I think as this class kind of comes more and more into form, and from the jump for me personally, the 2021 group running back wise. Wasn't a class I was super excited about in general. But the more I look into it, the more I dive into it, and you've said it a couple times now. It's just every year, it just feels like running back specifically, there's one or two players that just vault themselves to the top of the conversation, group wise, and then they can still kind of be had, late one, early two, mid two. Like, so there's a lot of value to be had in these backs, especially in the Williams mold, probably less so value wise, of course, for Williams, if we're talking about him as the RB3, but Michael Carter, could follow, a pick or two behind him, to your point, but offer similar upside, just given the production that we've seen in North Carolina, especially both of them being there at the same time.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting looking at these two players, and pro day testing is going to shake things up a lot as well. Both these guys are going to be highly coveted, but the broken tackle thing is just proven to be so valuable at the NFL level, and it's not some whimsical myth. It's not some bullshit metric. I mean, it's literally like a very valid combination of a player's like will to win, their vision, their shiftiness, their ability to just make enough of an angle adjustment to make things difficult for tacklers. And that's going to matter at the NFL level. I mean, it's not like he was playing in some subpar conference. And again, this is a guy that we expect to, be 5'10", 220, 225. So the BMI is going to be there.
Looks ideal. Yeah, looks ideal. And we've only talked about one back now outside of Williams. Williams is the second back that we're covering, and we got Etienne, Hubbard. We're gonna hit all the big name guys. And I don't know if we mentioned it at all talking about Harris, because I think with these videos we like to talk about kind of projected draft capital and where you and I would slot him rookie draft wise. Am I crazy, Nate, to think that? Again, as the pitcher comes into shape here, Harris, maybe Etienne, these guys might be top 32 selections. But for me, I don't know. And I'm talking about the class as a whole here, defenders, offensive, I don't know that we see Williams or Carter, for that matter, or really any back outside of maybe Harris and maybe Etienne, who might be fringe top 32, day one players for me. I'm not sure that Williams gets day one draft capital. And I don't know how much that really affects what you and I are trying to say here as far as where you and I would take him, rookie draft wise. I guess that all baked into his evaluation right here is kind of what I'm getting at for you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look at last year. Clyde Edwards was the only first-round running back. And if we flip the draft this year and go back in, I think there's a lot of people that are down on Clyde Edwards, and you would have a bunch of second-round running backs that we would have ranked ahead of him. And I agree. I think that the NFL is probably going to this will be interesting because I think the NFL is going to err on the positions that they feel like have the lowest probability of missing with such an incomplete profile with this COVID year. Sure. But I think that he's probably a second-round guy. Like, I think that we're probably going to see him go in that, 210, 215, 220, something like that. He's just too good, and too many teams need running backs. There's a lot of free agents that are flowing, but like the advantage for a team is to have a runner on a rookie contract, to have a quarterback on a rookie contract. So
opens up so much.
Yeah, so why would a team, if I'm a team and I'm looking at 26-and-a-half-year-old Chris Carson, where I've got, 21-and-a-half-year-old Williams here, 22-year-old Williams, who am I going to take? If I feel like I'm going to get similar production out of two players at a position that's very instinctual, I'm probably going to go with Williams because he's proved that he can catch the ball. He's a tough runner like Carson is. He can stand up and pass pro. So I'd probably lean that way, and I think a lot of teams are going to feel the same way with just sort of what's going to happen with the cap in the future and just overall overloading yourselves. There's a lot of teams in the league right now that are just underwater with bad contracts. And so I would prefer to get a running back. So I think he's a second-round guy. I feel the same way. You're probably the same way with Carter. He's made money at the Senior Bowl. He was, I think all the linebackers and safeties and whatever, like basically the secondary picked him as one of the most, or the best player on the other team, skill player. So it says a lot. You got other great seniors in the country saying, hey, this guy was impossible to deal with all week. This is the guy that we, want to tip our cap to. So with that being said, Ryan, I know you're definitely a comp guy. Do you have any comps for him?
Williams is a tough one, man, because again, you and I bring up Alvin Kamara's balance, and I don't think Williams is at all the type of player that I thought Kamara was coming out. I was smitten with Alvin Kamara. I don't quite see that level of player. I've seen a lot, and in my write up, I shouted out obviously our guy Fusuvu, who actually said Williams, who Fusu's been well ahead of. I think he might have him at RB1 even, or maybe RB2 at worst. He said Williams reminds him of Aaron Jones. So I've seen an Aaron Jones comparison for Javonte Williams. So similar builds there for sure. Again, I'm not sure that Williams is the type of athlete that Jones was coming out of UTEP. But take that for what it is. Fusu is a lot more consistent with me than comparisons. And our guy Ray G actually brought up this is going to be a bit of a throwback name for some man. Marion Barber, the old cowboy, is kind of who is who Ray sees when he sees Javonte Williams. I haven't found a player that, for me, I love comparisons. I know you and I have talked about him a ton. I love listening to them. I love poking fun from time to time. I'm not very good at doing them myself, but every once in a while, for every player, not for every player, but once in a while, there will be one that just sticks. It feels right. Williams, I haven't quite had that kind of light bulb go off yet, but Aaron Jones is a very interesting one. Again, given the pass catching ability and stuff like that, I don't think he tests that well. So I'm very interested to see kind of what Williams comes in at. If he's over 220, is that going to slow him down? Because that we want to at least see that burst or something. To some sort of calling card there in Williams games. We know he has the broken tackles, but athletically, where does he stand out for us?
It's this is so I got two that came to mind, and one of them feels funny to say because again, I always feel like people try to hang comps on you, and you're like, oh, they're not one for one. So,
yeah. There's a whole explanation or paragraph behind it, right?
No, so like a little bit of a throwback, like the physicality of him to me, kind of like sort of a little bit of a Ricky Williams type thing.
Ooh, I like it.
In terms of just that physicality, broken tackles, tough runner, kind of has a similar style. And this is going to be a wild one right here, but in all honesty, he runs effortlessly to me like the way that I watched LaShawn McCoy run. And he's very, very smooth. And that was one thing, maybe not the same like prowess as a ball carrier or shift, but just sort of, if you go back and watch him and think back to LaShawn McCoy, just sort of the way that he works angles and smoothness and effortness, as a runner. But comps are weird, man. I don't know. The Ricky Williams one felt tighter to me because he's just such a bruiser. But in the open field, he's not shying away from contact. Like, he's not going out of bounds.
Yeah, he is. He's definitely a bully, man. And you and I have kind of tipped our hands here as well. I mean, again, this is a player that I think we're confidently right now, as of you and I sitting down and talking here, January 31st. I think he is the RB3. I don't know that changes a whole ton outside of some disaster at a pro day or something like that. We hope that's not the case. The tape looks good, man. The production looks good, especially in the context of sharing a backfield with Michael Carter, who again, a rising player in his own right. Williams offers a lot. He feels pretty safe in a running back group that, again, for me personally, I wasn't really sold on a ton of names, but I think Williams has certainly settled into that conversation, made me feel good, much better about the top of this class. So I think RB3 and for rookie draft wise, I mean, I think, that 105, 6, 7 range, somewhere kind of mid first, late first or something like that. I think that probably makes a ton of sense for these upcoming rookie drafts, again, barring anything super unforeseen, medically, athletically or something like that.
And I don't know when people are going to hear the Kyle Pitts version of this, but this is one of the rare few players that for me may be in front of a guy like Kyle Pitts because just that immediate potential for production. If he goes to the right team, again, like imagine if, I got to look at the picks, but if there's a team that's sitting back with a mid-second round pick or they can make a move up and they select him, a team that's lost a veteran, again, Seattle or somebody like that kind of has some question marks about whether they're going to re-sign players or is the player in the backfield currently going to be enough. Yeah. Might be an interesting fit. So things can certainly change.
Second round, man, the top of the second round. And we've talked plenty and we'll probably talk a lot more about what James Robinson's future is in Jacksonville, but Jacksonville's 33 overall. You got the Jets right behind them at 34 overall, who don't have a back of consequence or a long-term option there at 34. Miami at 36 with from a pick from Houston. And then outside of that, I'm probably looking down to those three spots look pretty good for me. Jacksonville picks again at 45 in the second round. So those are three that kind of stand out to me. Miami again at 50. So definitely some pretty interesting spots. I've talked about 3 teams that I've come back to now. So I think one of those 3 teams make a ton of sense, but there's definitely some options there, man, at the top of the second.
I mean,
for sure.
and all those teams are going to have a new quarterback. And what if Williams went to Miami and so did Watson? I mean, suddenly the face of what you would start to question.
Rocket ship emojis,
right? Like,
man.
Even if ETN went to maybe a situation that people liked a lot less, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but if he had gone to one that was less desirable, and then you get Watson in Miami and Williams goes there too, like it would be a very interesting.
Easy leapfrog there for sure.
A certain conversation to have, Ryan. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to the pro days and the NFL draft, and I think confidently we're going to continue to keep a guy like this right there at that RB3 position.